everyone, it's Jen. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be making this extra large gift bag, and I am using watercolor paper for this project. I'm going to show you how to customize and color your own paper to match your pattern papers. So this is a piece of 11 by 15 watercolor paper, and all I'm going to do is match up the color of my pattern paper, which is that triangle pattern on the back side or the bottom. I'm going to match it up to a color of ink that I have, and I'm going to use Wild Honey ink for my project that we're going to make today. You can do this a couple different ways. I actually did direct to paper with my ink pad. Just going to take dry paper and move the ink around, and then I'm going to spray it with a some water using a little spray bottle here in just a second. I have the Wild Honey re-inker as well, and that probably would have been a little bit easier, but I did it this way instead, so it worked out perfectly fine, and the end project comes out very, very nice. So you just want to move the ink around once you decide what color is going to match your pattern paper, or however you're going to, you know, you could even just use regular watercolor with this and do some kind of like multicolor effect, or you can leave it just one color, however you want to do it. You're just basically going to need a piece of 11 by 15 watercolor paper for this project. You can let it dry. I would recommend letting it dry on its own for several hours, overnight preferably. Your adhesive will stick better. The project will go together probably a little bit easier if you let it dry. I actually got my heat tool out and did it myself. Those bristles that you see that are stuck to the paper from my paintbrush, once the paper is dry, those will flake off, so I'm not too worried about that right now. We're going to let the paper dry, and then we're going to come back and work on scoring the project and putting it all together. All right, let's go ahead and score and assemble our extra large gift bag here. What you're going to want to do is take your 15-inch side of your paper and align it with the top of the scoreboard. Now I know being 15 inches, it's going to hang off, and that's okay. Go ahead and line it up to the left-hand side, and you're going to score it at 1 inch. This is the top of your bag. So if there's a certain way you want the pattern, you know, a certain way you want the paper to go, just know that this is the top of the bag. So score that at 1 inch. You're going to flip it over, and you're going to score the bottom at 2 3/4. Now once you have that scored, you're going to take the bottom of the paper and you're going to put it at the top of the scoreboard, just like I have it here. You're going to go to the 2 5/8 mark, and you're going to score only to that score line and stop. We're going to move down to the 5 1/4 inch mark, and we're going to score all the way down. Now stop before you get to the end of the scoreboard so you don't poke a hole through the paper. We'll get the rest of it scored in just a minute. Move over to 7 7/8 and just score that to your score line. Don't go all the way down. Just do 7 7/8 to the score line and stop. Move down to 10 1/2, and this is going to go all the way down again. Now stop before you get to the end of the scoreboard so you don't poke a hole in your paper. Flip your paper over, and you're going to go over to the 5 1/4 inch mark, and when you make that mark, you're going to match up with the score line that you made just a second ago. And then you're going to do the same thing, scoot down to 10 1/2, and it should match up with the score line that you made. So this is what your project should look like. You should have a 1 inch score line at the top. You should have your 2 3/4 inch score line at the bottom. Here I'm just showing you the flap. This is your top line here. And then your bottom is down here, your 2 3/4. So then what we're going to do is we need to make our triangles to make our box a faceted box. So you're going to, there's 2 rectangles for the front and the back. So you're going to start at the top of that one corner, and you're going to match it up to the middle, that middle box, the middle score line of those 2 boxes in that rectangle down at the bottom. So you're going from the top corner, from the corner scored line all the way down to the bottom, to that scored line, and you're making triangles within those rectangles. So the top corner just underneath that top flap, you're going to the middle of the bottom of that section of that rectangle, and you're just putting in a score line with your straight edge and your scoring tool. So we want to reinforce some of those score lines, but not the top one. Leave the top one alone. It works better if you don't score that. So we're just reinforcing some of these score lines at the bottom. We're going to reinforce that. We can go ahead and cut off some of the pieces. You have underneath your flap, you have a small rectangle piece. We're going to just cut that off. And then at the top, you have a small rectangle piece. We're going to cut that off. And that leaves you with the flap there on the side. Then at this point, those score lines that you made to create that triangle, you can go ahead and reinforce those score lines. Now, with this being watercolor paper, it's thick and it holds up great for this kind of project. So it worked out really, really well. So reinforce those score lines. I'm cutting in on the bottom score lines, just ever so slightly notching in so that we cut out some of that extra paper we do not need. I'm going to clean up some of these other edges on the bottom flaps, and then we can start assembling our adhesive to the box. I am going to stick some adhesive on the inside, right here on this side, the opposite of the flap. And then if you take and you put adhesive on the flaps that are on the opposite side of, the bottom tabs, opposite side of the little side flap there, that's a pretty good rule, because you don't want adhesive on the back bottom flap, and it is always the flap that is next to the side tab. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of what I'm trying to show you now. So we're going to peel that adhesive backing off. We're going to fold our tab under, and we're going to stick it all together. Now my head gets in the way a little bit here because I'm trying to figure out and get everything lined up. So I just mash it all together and line it up, and there's our box. Now before I assemble the box, we're going to go ahead and cut out the pattern panels to go on the front and the back. And what we're going to do is you need to take a piece of paper that is 5 1/4 by 10 1/2, and you're going to find the center point on the 5 1/4 inch side. So you can line it up on your trimmer, on your scoreboard, whatever, but if you take 5 1/4 and you split it in half, that's 2 5/8. So you need to mark either with a pencil or your scoring tool, mark at 2 5/8 on the 5 1/4 inch side. So you can do this by lining it up on your trimmer. You can take your scissors, you can take your ruler, your straight edge, and use a pencil or pen, mark a line from the top of the panel to the middle of the bottom. And you can kind of just follow what I'm doing here. You can do it with your trimmer. If you line it up on that track, line that top corner with that middle scored line that you had on the bottom. Now here you'll see me cut a little piece off, because when I originally did this, I cut the panel at 11 inches and it was too long. So I modified the piece to where when I do it next time, I'm only going to cut it to 10 1/2 so that it fits properly. It was actually a little bit long, and the bottom point was going off of my bag. So like I said, you'll see me here modify this piece, but if you actually just cut it 5 1/4 by 10 1/2, it will fit. Excuse me. So we match everything up. We're going to put some adhesive on the back of the panel, and then basically do the same thing for the back side. You'll see me here, I use this dry adhesive, and then I use wet adhesive on the corners, especially on that bottom point, because I didn't really get the dry adhesive in that point very well. So once I peel off the backing to the dry adhesive, I'll take my wet adhesive and just stick some in the corners and the point of this triangle piece, just so that it holds the corners down a little bit better. So we'll just apply the panel, and we're going to do the same exact thing on the other side. All right, now that we have both of our panels on, the front and the back with pattern paper, we're going to take the adhesive off of the bottom flaps. The back flap goes in first. It does not have any adhesive on it. And then the two side flaps will be folded in. And then the front flap will be folded in. Now, for some reason, I had a little bit of overage on my flaps. So I'm just cutting that off with my scissors. No big deal. So this is basically our box. I took my corner rounder and rounded the corners on the top. Just so that it finished it out a little bit better. Since you're cutting through 2 layers of watercolor paper, it's a little bit thick. But these boxes turned out wonderful. They're thick, they're heavy duty. I went ahead and got some stamps and stamped some greetings. You'll see those in a minute. But to open this box, you just take and squeeze the top. It doesn't need any special kind of closure or anything like that. It goes back by itself. So they're really cool boxes, and I love making these. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.